Over the weekend, I did an episode which I talked about the tier list of prospects that the Chicago Bulls should look at in the 2024 draft. On today's episode, we're going to flip that. We're also going to look at prospects that I think the Chicago Bulls should stay far away from in this draft. We're also going to talk about the style of play that the Chicago Bulls really want to adapt with this roster and kind of what best fits the group. We're going to look at some analytics for that. And then we're going to talk about the importance of getting players that then fit that play style to add versatility. We're going to get all that and more, plus a little bit of the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. So I've been very positive in regards to the draft, right? I kind of like to keep my focus in regards to, the positivities, even the players that I cover, and kind of focus on players that I think will fit the Chicago Bulls rather than just kind of focus on players that I feel like won't. But with that said, you do have to have both sides of the coin. And even with all the prospects that we've covered in this draft, I believe we're at almost 40 prospects I've covered in this draft, which with the Bulls being sitting at number 11, I hope that at this point, I've been doing this for 3 years now, and both last 2 years they drafted players I ended up not covering in there. So let's hope that they do this case. But I want to talk about some of the prospects I personally feel that the Chicago Bulls should stay away from. And in this, to be fair, I'm also going to talk about points of maybe why the player could work for the Chicago Bulls. So I'm not going to just stay in the negative. That's not really where I like to be at, right? But I do want to be honest in my personal opinions. And the first one on the list should surprise nobody. Zach Edey. Now, I get it. And we'll talk. You know what? Let's talk about the strengths of Zach Edey. A lot of the strengths that Zach Edey has as a player is his basketball IQ. Let's just be clear there. Zach Edey has one of the highest basketball IQs of any player in this draft. He just is. He's an extremely smart basketball player. On top of that, he's enormous. Enormous. Like he's a huge human being. Like it's just, you can't take away from that. And sometimes you still do need size in the NBA. So, that comes down to when you look at it, almost 7'4", with a 7'10" wingspan. Like the dude is an absolutely huge human. And he's going to, because of what he can do with his back to the basket and things like that, he brings that. Rebounding wise, averaging 12 rebounds a game last season in college, averaging 25 points per game on 65% shooting, 2.2 blocks per game. Zach Edey, the statistics are going to tell you that this dude is an absolute darling when it comes down to it. And listen, don't get me wrong. It's not that I started this off thinking, hey, Zach Edey may be out of the NBA in 2 or 3 years. Now, with his basketball IQ and even, yes, what he did in the draft combine, I can admit that Zach Edey's probably going to stick around the NBA for a long time, but I think he's going to be a rotational piece. Some people see the upside as a starter, and if you could do that, I just don't know if that's the team. When it comes down to it, the negatives for Zach Edey that I have for him are basically what this team seems like they're going to try to go. Now, if they change that direction, that could be. Overall, I think Zach Edey is a huge reach for the Chicago Bulls at number 11. If we picked somewhere between like 18 and lower, a lot of these negatives could go away. But let's look at it. 22 years old, and he's that's one of the older players in the draft. Take that for what you will. The Bulls are far away. We want high upside, right? He's a very traditional big man in an era where big men are becoming more skilled, right? And while defensively, physically, he's going to be able to stand up to the NBA game. You got to look at it. This isn't a game where bigs just bang down low. If you're a team that either if you're facing a team that either plays up tempo or has a big man that can stretch the floor, if you pull Zach Edey anywhere out of about 10 feet away from the basket, it's done. Everybody's going to be able to blow by Zach Edey at the NBA level. In the college level, because the floor is much smaller, he was able to use his side to counteract that. And he'll be able to do that a little bit in the NBA level as well. But I just think with the speed that we're seeing, the fact that the Bulls like to switch everything, you're talking about a player in Zach Edey that, like I said, you pull him away from that basket, about 80% of his benefits go away immediately when you're able to do that. And no, before people get saying there's not a scheme that you can draw up in the NBA in the modern game where you can just leave a big man solely in the paint. He's gonna have to switch out. Now, another thing that's not his fault, right? I want to be clear, not everything is his fault, is that the Chicago Bulls don't have the best perimeter defense. We actually had our worst defensive season, and already a team that we're trying to get Vooch out of using drop coverage, right, to get away from that. Zach Edey does not have the ability and the athleticism to recover at a fast enough rate that he's going to need to with the way the Chicago Bulls play defense out on the perimeter. Now, again, that's something that could change, but the weaknesses are just loud when it comes to Zach Edey. Now, like I've said before, his strengths are also loud, and I think ultimately when you look at it, at worst, Zach Edey is going to turn to a rim-protecting post player that can rebound for you. And that's solid. Now, is he going to have the 2 rebounds per game? I mean, 2 blocks per game that he had in college? We'll end up seeing, right? The reaction time and things like that, the quickness, the switchability as well. That could be a thing against him. But I just don't like Zach Edey, where the Bulls select at, and for the way that this current team is going to seem to be going. I just don't. I think that you have players with way higher upsides that can be more versatile, that you don't have to be. Zach Edey is the type of player that he's going to have to play on a very particular team. That team is going to have a particular set of skills, a point guard that can get him involved, solid perimeter defense, the ability to counteract and have some other size, especially in those switching situations, and a team that just does not care about playing fast. And that doesn't seem like it fits the Chicago Bulls. Again, Zach Edey is not the most terrible prospect in this draft, but I also think the rise that you're seeing him have is because of the weakness perceived in this draft overall, and not because he's this amazing NBA prospect, in my personal opinion. But hey, we'll end up seeing with that, but that is why I wanted to give the strengths as well as his negatives. Of course, more negatives because I don't want to see the Bulls draft him. I don't think he fits with his goals, but there are absolutely strengths when it comes down to Zach Edey, and you have to ask yourself, as an NBA team, are you in a position to best maximize those strengths that Zach Edey has? And for the Bulls fans to say, well, he can block shots, he can rebound. Yeah, he can do that, but unfortunately, there's 2 sides of the coin here. That you can't. He's not just going to be able to do that in the NBA. We are so far gone from times where big men can just be specialists. And yeah, some players can do that if they're rotational and bench pieces, but at number 11, that's not necessarily where I want to see the Bulls go, especially when you have the high upsized guys like Matas Bucilis, Tajon Saloon, like those type of guys, or even guys who seem to be more suited for today's NBA game than Zach Edey. So that's what it comes down to with Zach Edey for me. Again, I know not every Bulls fan is going to agree with that, and you shouldn't. You don't have to, right? But ultimately, he's just a player that I would like to see the Bulls stay far away from in this upcoming draft. Next up is a player that I was initially high on, and it's not that I'm down on their skill set overall or their prospect. It's just that it would be the same thing that the Bulls have done, and that's Cody Williams. Cody Williams was a player that initially was mocked to go to the Bulls in some mocks, and he still kind of is in some as well. Initially looked at as one of the maybe top 4 to 5 prospects in this draft. A lot of mocks started having him going more towards 9, 10, around the area where the Chicago Bulls could draft him, and the overall just comes down to this for me. Cody Williams is so similar to what we've already done. Yes, he maybe has higher upside of being only 19 years old, right? But it'll be 20 the majority of his rookie year. And we have a player that's very much like Cody Williams and Patrick Williams already on this team who's 22 years old. Yes, Patrick Williams is up for a contract extension, so there could be something to be said about, hey, Haize, Cody Williams, he resets the clock, right? The rookie clock. That's what they talked a lot about this offseason with Justin Fields and Caleb Williams, and you get that. The thing is, not an amazing leaper at all. Yes, he can dunk the basketball, but not a great leaper. He's supposed to be this projecting to be this 3-and-D wing kind of, but ultimately he's an underwhelming 3-point shooter. He doesn't take a whole hell of a lot of them. He did hit him at a 41% clip, but it was 1.7 per game. And in games where Cody Williams actually took volume threes, he didn't shoot a good percentage at all. So he does have solid mechanics. So you could see maybe that 3-point shot rounding out for him. But at the end of the day, he doesn't pull up for mid-range either. So it's those type of things holding him back. He needs to get stronger. He's slim. That could probably come around for him for sure. But, with not being an elite athlete at all, and the fact that, he's solid overall, has a great feel for the game. He does have some passing ability, so he can have that point forward. But like I said, this would kind of be the pick that is the exact type of pick that AK has made. So not necessarily the player that I'm against, like the person in Cody Williams. It's more so the archetype. And that's something that AK has already drafted basically the last 3 years. And ultimately, we need other things than that and what Cody Williams brings, in my personal opinion. And so that's what lands him on this list of kind of prospects that I honestly would like to see the Chicago Bulls stay away from. Now, in fairness, if Cody Williams ended up there at number 11 and the Bulls drafted him, it's not like I'd be rioting or anything, but I would ask them then, okay, what's the plan with the other pieces that you have on this roster that all kind of bring similar things to what Cody Williams already brings? That's the question in this one that I would have in a case like that. But then the next player that's in this list and in this tier also is A.J. Johnson. Now, this is a foreign prospect, but not to say that any mocks have really had him. He's slated to go somewhere between late first, but he's somebody that I want to see the Bulls stay far. I didn't even cover him in any of my position groups. He's a combo guard, 6'4", with a 6, almost 7 wingspan. I guess as a guard that maybe fits the profile that AK looks at. But at the end of the day, position. We don't I guess we could use a combo guard, especially if we're going to be moving off Alex Caruso, which we're not guaranteed yet. He's a solid ball handler. Has a really good feel for the game also. But ultimately, this guy's just so unproven that this would be even more raw than what Dalen Terry was, in my personal opinion. You look at what he did in the NBL, 2.9 points per game, 27% shooting from three, only 1.2 rebounds, less than 1 assist per game. Now, he didn't play a whole hell of a lot of minutes, but at being 6'4", almost 6'5", 167 pounds, I'm sorry, this is an extremely raw prospect, and he's just the type of player that I would like to see the Bulls stay away from in this draft. This type of raw, this is even more raw than Tajon Saloon, Mattis Bucilis. This is the type of raw that I see a championship caliber team. That's probably why he's slated to go late in the first. A championship caliber team playing and taking a look at it and saying, hey, maybe if we can develop this guy over 1-2 years, being in the G League, he may be able to turn into a steal for us because he is so raw. But it's not a player that I would like to see the Chicago Bulls really take a shot at all in this draft. Isaiah Collier almost made this list. I still ultimately like him, but again, he's moved down a lot of mocks. When the season first ended, he was slated to go to the Bulls by a lot of mock drafts. He's moved all the way from that number 11 range down to the mid-20s. He's a guy that at number 11, I'd definitely like to see the Bulls stay away from. And then a player that I actually like overall, but at number 11 would be ridiculous, and that's Yves Missy. Yves is a talented player that has some concerns about his motor and things like that, as far as his ability to play a lot of minutes. And I love, as a lob threat, his shot blocking, the rebound, how he hustles, all that type of stuff. But at number 11, no. Now, if the Bulls were able to acquire a pick between 18 and 25, I wouldn't mind taking a shot at Yves Missy at all. But I just, he's not a player that's really high on my board at all, especially not at number 11. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Who are some players that you would like to see the Bulls stay completely away from in this draft that you just think won't fit the team because of position need, whatever else it is? Let me know all that down below. And I already know a voicemail is coming from my brother Corn because I mentioned his boy first. But let's go ahead and get into the next topic for today. I want to talk about what type. I talked a lot in my players I want to see the Bulls stay away from is play type. And you got to ask yourself, how do the Bulls want to play next season, right? And then how do they go out and get that? So just to go over some numbers, the Bulls had the 3rd slowest pace in the league last season. We also took the 4th. We were the 4th worst 3-point shooting team in the league per volume. We were the 9th worst per 3-point shooting percentage, and we had the 12th least blocks in the NBA last season. Now, some things that the Bulls did well. They were the 12th best rebounding team in the league, which was still a little bit of a step down. We could be much better. We were 3rd best at limiting our own turnovers. And then, by the way, we were 8th worst, since we're talking about being one of the best at limiting turnovers, but we were 8th worst in the league at assists per game. So what does that mean? When you look at it, the Bulls should want to play quicker. And I'm not saying they want to be a run and gun team or anything like that, but when you play the 3rd slowest pace in the league, that kind of stands out, I think, a lot, especially with the young players that you have, and seeing how Alex Caruso and Ayo Dosunmu and maybe Javonte Green were our best players in transition last year. Now, when you look at the other teams that were around the Chicago Bulls, as far as that low in pace, they actually had some success. The Knicks, the slowest pace in the league at 95.19. You had the Miami Heat at 96.21 next up, and then us, the Bulls, at 96.28 pace. And then you had the Denver Nuggets at 96.85 pace. So the Bulls are actually surrounded by and when you look at the slower paced teams, by some really good teams, right? Which makes it even worse. But then when you throw in those other aspects of the game, right? The fact that we take the 4th least amount of threes, that's just not going to cut it in the time where you're also playing slow. and being one of the worst 3-point shooting teams by percentage. So yeah, we didn't take a whole lot of threes because we weren't good at hitting them. If you can become more efficient at that, you don't necessarily need to be this huge volume 3-point shooting team, but you do want players that can hit the three at a decent rate. And I think that's something that the Bulls are looking for as well. And then, of course, rim protection. That's something that we know we need, the rebounding aspect as well. So when you look at how the Bulls want to play, I do think that they want to play faster. Not to say that they want to be the fastest paced team in the league, were the Lakers and the Hawks at over 100 pace with that. And, you know, those weren't some of the best teams in the league either. They were followed by the Mavericks, who played the third highest pace, and the Milwaukee Bucks, who played the fourth highest pace. So there's some variance as far as and the OKC Thunder at fifth, right? So there's some variance in depending on how you play fast, right? And so I think the Bulls do want to increase that. They talked about that last offseason as well, about wanting to play with the quicker pace more naturally. And what gets you there? Rebounding the ball better defensively, forcing more turnovers, taking care of the ball, spreading the ball around a little bit more, right? And so that's what it seems like, the pace that the style that the Bulls want to have. And so you got to get players that fit that pace. And that's the next thing up, right? You got to ask yourself, in this offseason, for the Chicago Bulls, what do they prioritize? I have 3 things on the list here that I think they should prioritize, and that is rebounding and block shots, right? If they can get somebody who can rebound and block shots while also being able to thrive in a more up-tempo game, right? Just being able to be a threat in the transition, whether it's you're the 3-point shooting trailer there, or you can run with the guards as a big man and you're a lob threat to finish around the rim. I think that fits the best, right? And then shot creation. The Bulls have to be better at creating their own shots, specifically in the half court. When you look in the half court for the Chicago Bulls, sometimes we're solid, right? I think that run in December initially when Zach LaVine went down, that was probably some of the best half court offense we played in the entire season, but it was a flash in the pan. But at that time, the Bulls spread the ball around more. You didn't really know where the attack was coming from because of their ability to spread the ball around. And so that's something that I think the Bulls theoretically we want to add as well, is just to have that ability to spread the ball around, a little bit more shot creation in the half court so you can be a more solid team overall. I think that helps the Bulls tremendously in a case like this. So I think those are the things that you're looking at the Bulls, of course, kind of prioritizing in this offseason. And then, of course, getting back to what we were defensively. We've been a top 10 to 12 defense the 2 years prior to last season. We completely fell off defensively last season. And there's a lot of reasons why, right? We had a lot of players kind of playing other positions and things like that. But we have to find a way to get better to being a more consistent defensive team. Now, of course, rebounding better helps that. Shot blocking better helps that. Limiting your own turnovers obviously helps that as well, right? So you got to be a better team when it comes down to the defensive side of the game. And if the Bulls can't do that, it's going to be a rough season for them. So the Bulls really need to look like at those things, in my opinion, and getting stronger in that. The Bulls can't keep being a team that runs a slow pace, doesn't play a modern style offense, and can't defend. They're the 16th best defensive team per points per game allowed. That's not defensive rating. That's points allowed. They have to be better than that or be able to put up more points on the board. One of the reasons why the Bulls did slide as far as record this season is that even though we weren't never a volume 3-point shooting team, we were better defensively. And that's where the Bulls fell off a lot last season as well. And so hopefully we can find a way through our acquisitions this year, through the way that we changed the team, of getting better in those aspects. So that's kind of what I think the Bulls are looking at, or what they should kind of prioritize this upcoming offseason. And we'll see if they do, man. We'll see if they do. But before we go, we do got an email, and I've been terrible about actually reading emails. We get so many voicemails that the email can sometimes get forgotten. But we do have an email. This one's from Zandis Hoover. Hoover is not the right Hoover. Shout out. Says, sup Haize, currently bored at work, and I watched your most recent video, which got me thinking about a situation. I'm one of the biggest AC fans, but sadly, I don't see the Bulls doing anything anytime soon to make his abilities worthwhile where you can win another championship. What are your thoughts on trading him for a top 5 pick this year to grab the Lithuanian forwards and then packaging someone with the number 3 to move up a few spots to possibly grab the center from UConn? I think guard-wise, we're set up a lineup of Kobe, Io, Pat, and DeMar at the 3. And with those 2 rookies could be pretty solid in my opinion. Let me know what you think. As always, see red. All right, so anytime you start getting into the area, and this isn't to come at you, anytime you start getting into the area of, oh, well, we can trade this player and get this, and then we can package that with this, and then we can move up here, you start getting outside the real realm of reality, I think. Like, not to say the teams haven't done that and been flexible. I think the Pistons made a lot of moves last year in the draft. So, but I think ultimately, if the Bulls can get up and trade AC for a pick outright and like another top 10 pick, then that would mean that would probably be enough. I think you're looking at there are enough high upside picks at number 11. So we'll see what happens there. But I think ultimately, I get what you're getting at with AC. I would love to see AC stay here. And a lot of people look at it and I don't get I'm not saying that you're saying this. I don't get the people who talk about it like, oh, well, we're wasting AC. No, he's not wasting. He's playing in the NBA and playing at a high level and contributing to his team winning. We don't even know if AC is really tripping off being on a title contender right now. He does have his ring, and he may like the stability of being in the same place and knowing his role and being valued on this team. That very well could be what he does value. Now, could he be he's going to be over 30 next season? Could look at it and say, hey man, I got a chance to really be a big contributor on a team and maybe win another title or two, depending on the team that I can go to. That could be a possibility, right? But I think the Bulls, and what I've always said about Alex Caruso is that they have to explore the market. Not because they don't want AC, not because AC isn't a great player for the Chicago Bulls. It comes down to you lost a lot of assets in building this team. And you got to at some point start trying to recoup those or just gain new assets because this team ain't winning the title anytime soon. So if a team is willing to give you a heavily protected first-round pick in the 2025 draft and a low pick in this draft, because I think more championship contenders will be interested in AC, I think you have to take that. If a team like the Houston Rockets at number 3 look at it AC and say, hey, yeah, AC, the Portland picks, we're willing to take that. You can have this number 3 overall pick. I still don't think that's likely, but if they were, the Bulls got to at least explore that and look at the talent they can get there at number 3 and think it and ask themselves, is it talent that really could help up the ceiling for the Chicago Bulls? That's what it comes down to, I think, in my opinion. I don't hate your thought process on it at all. I do think that it is something that is probably going to be explored, but we'll ultimately see if the Bulls end up pulling the trigger on something there, brother. But Xandis, thank you for leaving that email. But that's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.